we very recently did an entire Rhythm Encounter episode on Phoenix Wright,
Oh,
the
nice.
Ace Attorney series. And then I think a couple of weeks after we published that episode, you did that whole analysis on the trial sequence for all the games. And I was just like, your thing's better.
No.
So much.
Funny how
so much more fun.
Kind of thing happens.
Hello, welcome to episode 85 of Rhythm Encounter, the RPG fan music podcast. I'm hosting today. I'm Hilary Andreff. Very excited to be here because today we are talking about music theory with the creator of the popular YouTube channel 8-Bit Music Theory. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
We're really excited to pick your brain about analyzing music and lots of other things. So can't wait to get started. And also joining me is Pat Gann.
Hey, everybody.
One of our resident music experts. So how's everyone doing today?
Doing good.
It's a beautiful day in my neighborhood of Pittsburgh.
It's a nice day here, too.
It is nice. It's about time we have a nice day. So just so everyone listening knows, the host of 8-Bit Music Theory, you go by the name 8-Bit online. That's your handle, yes?
Yes, I am 8-Bit. Mr. 8-Bit to you. No, just
oh, excuse me. Professor 8-Bit.
Yeah.
Can we just keep adding titles as the episode goes on?
Yeah.
Yes.
Dr. Professor, Mr. 8-Bit.
Dr. Professor, Mr. Maestro, 8-Bit. Okay.
His Royal Highness and Eminence.
Yeah.
High Priest of Music.
Well, very excited again. So the way this is going to go, we have an exciting announcement to start off with, which is about an upcoming album. So we'll go into that first. And then we're going to have a little primer on musical vocabulary, because here on Rhythm, something that we often do is we talk about different aspects of the tracks that we listen to and why we chose them for the episode theme that we've selected. So we're excited to take this opportunity to use some of 8-Bit's videos to kind of break down some of the terminology and help us all analyze music. And then we're going to talk a little bit about 8-Bit's creative process. And then we have a fun little segment where we're going to play some music and put him on the spot.
Ooh.
And
the hot
make
seat.
some comments.
Live analysis.
Analysis.
Amazing.
A music theory pop quiz.
But don't worry.
I've been out of school
get
a while.
grade.
I'm rusty. No.
Well, considering who's grading you, I think you get an A no matter what, because we're bad teachers.
Well, good. Awesome.
All right, so yeah, just starting off, we did say upcoming. For us in this moment, it's upcoming, but for you, the listener, by the time we've gotten this podcast out, we're pretty sure the album will also be out. Back in April, 8-Bit, you posted a little teaser video on your YouTube page, and I imagine your Patreon followers probably knew more about it, that you are making your debut album. Is that right?
That's right. My first foray into actually putting out music on the internet. It's pretty exciting.
Cool. So tell us about it. What's the album? What's the name? What are you doing?
Oh, the name is Let's Play, and it's the concept of the album is growing up. I'm of the age where as a kid, my first big console I got into was the GameCube, and so I have a lot of nostalgia for Nintendo. Classic GameCube games, and a lot of that music is still my favorite video game music. And I'm also a very big fan of jazz fusion, and especially the kind of 80s Japanese jazz fusion that actually was a big inspiration on early Japanese game composers like Koji Kondo and the like. And so I had this idea of, I want to do an album of video game music kind of arranged in this 80s Japanese jazz fusion kind of style. And so I have been kind of chipping away. I made these arrangements that I made for the album like a couple of years ago now, probably, and then just sat on them and kind of thought, it was fun to make those arrangements. I bet you I'll never do anything with them. then slowly, different things kind of came together where I realized, maybe I could get this actually recorded. So I re-edited the arrangements over and over and over again until I thought they were good enough, and I got just the best local Winnipeg jazz musicians I could find into a room, and we all recorded live these arrangements and banged them out, a whole album in 3 days, and it's pretty cool. I'm very happy with how it turned out. The other guys on the album just like crushed it, absolutely destroyed. So it's super fun for me to listen to them improvising on my arrangements and stuff. And there's all the bangers that you would expect from a GameCube themed album. There's Rainbow Road from Double Dash. There's Delfino Plaza from Super Mario Sunshine. There's lots of other tunes, lots of other great tunes that I'm sure you'll love. So everyone go listen to it.
I have a million questions about it. My first question is, do you know if any of the musicians that work with you on it have previous experience with recording for video game music, whether it's a arranged album or like source composition for a game?
No, not that I know of. They're kind of all gigging jazz musicians and teachers too.
Nice.
So it was kind of funny because being in the video game music world, you go to the conventions and stuff, and you're online, and it's very much like a tight community, and there's a lot that people kind of take for granted. And it's kind of funny talking to musicians outside of that world where it's like, oh, video game music. Oh, I guess video games do have music, don't they? Oh, yeah. It's like, oh, yeah, you really are not aware of this. But, they were very interested. They said, oh, that's a cool idea. And it was funny. A couple of the tunes, none of them were huge gamers, but a couple of the tunes, they were like, oh, I remember, I did play this Mario Kart. I remember this from Mario Kart. Yeah. They got super into it, and it was very fun.
Who can forget Rainbow Road? You hear it once,
It's
with you for life.
It's in there. Yeah, exactly. You're never getting rid of it.
And since it's Rainbow Road, exactly, you're going to have some memories associated with it too.
Yeah.
Joyous and frustrating.
Yes.
Yeah.
So question, which Metroid Prime music did you arrange? And if it's not Phendrana, why is it not Phendrana?
So I knew I wanted to do something for Metroid Prime. And listening through the soundtrack, so much of it is atmospheric, lots of just synth pads and cool sounds that doesn't necessarily translate easily to like, a band with a rhythm section where you're trying to play fun grooves and cool melodies. So I was trying to think of how to make it work. And that arrangement I did, it's not of Phendrana, but it was of the crashed ship frigate Orpheon, which is when you're underwater. I'm pretty sure now, I'm second guessing myself, but it's the big ship that crashes underwater.
Yep.
And so it's again super atmospheric. The kind of the melody, quote unquote, is just this like doo doo, like really slow, just two notes. But so I kind of like stretched that out into this really slow groove, and then I found a way to metrically modulate from this really slow 16th note groove to a kind of Afro-Cuban-y 6/8 thing.
Ooh.
And so that there's a connection of like, the whole thing's just kind of one chord synth pad through the whole song originally. And so I made like just vamping on one chord in kind of a modal jazz kind of style, because that's also idiomatic of modal jazz. And so it's like this groove over one chord and this Afro-Cuban-y kind of feel. And I let the guys in the band just kind of stretch out and improvise however long they wanted. And it was kind of funny recording it, because I had this structure set up of like, okay, we'll play the melody, we'll solo, then I'll have another little melody segment, and then another solo, and then we'll play the melody out, kind of like structured in a way. Mm-hmm. And the guitarist just got like possessed by the devil or something. He was just shredding. And then the horns come in to play the melody, and that's like supposed to be him ending the solo, and he just keeps playing through it. And so everyone looks at me, and I'm like, keep going, just keep going, don't stop. And so we're like playing through, and then everyone's like, okay, but now where? We all had to like really, really give each other big nods to figure out like, okay, this is going to be the end. Now we're going back to that section we just plowed through before, and we're going to, and so we got to the mixing room, and he was like, I think you should just keep it the way it is. It's like, yeah, I think so too. So that one's, I think that's the longest track on the album, just because of this surprise guitar solo, surprisingly long guitar solo, I guess.
But I mean, that's the cool part of that format, is you never know when you're going to get something like that. So you'd rather have it than not have it, I'm sure.
Well, and that's my, like, the thing that I appreciate the most about music, playing music and listening, is that spontaneity of like people in a room like really trying to make something together. And obviously, like that's a pretty small segment of all music that has that, but that's really what gets me excited. So I want to try and capture that in this album.
I have to say, I was actually going to say if you didn't pick Vendrana, I was hoping it was Orpheon, because you're right. For such an ambient, heavy soundtrack, if you want to do something experimental, like why not go all the way? And I think that is a fan favorite track. I've heard arrangements of it when Nintendo releases compilation albums. They tend to include that song.
Right.
So, good choice. I can't wait to hear the whole thing. I'm like super psyched. Unfortunately for us RPG fans at RPG Fan, my understanding is with it being a GameCube focused album, it's a little light on the RPG front, though you did cover 2 different Zelda games, right?
Yes. Wind Waker. I had to do Wind Waker. It's kind of my all-time favorite game. First game I ever bought as a kid. But I'm sure there's no nostalgia at play. I'm sure it's just objectively the best game ever made.
It's fantastic for sure.
Well, and so, yeah, I mean, I definitely was cognizant of like, I want to pick tunes that people know and already like. But then there's also a couple deep cuts. Like Wind Waker, I don't know if it's a deep cut actually, but the Mulgara boss fight theme.
It is. I think that would be a deep cut in most people's eyes.
Because it's pretty, it's definitely not, if you think Wind Waker music, you're like, oh, the ocean theme and, maybe Outside Island and Dragon Roost. Oh, Dragon Roost, of course. But I just had an idea for the Mulgara theme for the arrangement that I couldn't pass up. So I had to do that. And then for Twilight Princess, I did the tune Our Children Taken, which has always been like one of my favorite pieces of video game music. It's so beautiful, this like dark, slow ballad. But then I think it's like barely in the game. It's on the soundtrack, and like listening through the soundtrack, it's you have this beautiful piece of music, but then playing through the game, I didn't even notice it. So
it's one of those ones. It's like, wait, does it play for about 30 seconds somewhere?
I think it's like a singular cutscene with like no reuse.
Yeah, exactly. So that one, I'm sure no one will know, but that was another one where it's just too good of a tune where I had to put it on the album.
They're gonna know it.
They're gonna know it now.
They listen to your version. Did you do anything with the GameCube boot up jingle?
Yeah, well, that's how it opens. The very first track is just
perfect.
Yeah.
Is that a 12-tone pattern?
I don't think it is. It's if it is, it's probably by accident because it's a lot of fourths.
Yeah, it's stacked fourth arpeggiated. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and then just kind of like chromatically shifting through these groups of fourths. In a really rhythmically off-kilter way.
Well, if you run Circle of Fifths or Circle of Fourths up, you do get all 12 tones eventually.
That's true. I'd have to look at it and see. Count the accidentals. Are there 12 here? That was fun to make those guys play too in the band. You get the sheet music and they're like, oh, okay. How fast is this? All right. And the piano player especially, he was like, I'm going to get it one more time. He just crushed it.
Oh, man.
And, side note, first musical definition for people who might be listening, an accidental is, and people can add or like correct this definition as needed, but an accidental is a note in a piece of music that is either shifted sharp or flat. The tone is shifted slightly in a kind of unexpected based on the key signature.
That's right. Yeah, it's our sharps, flats, and neutrals if you have to go outside of the
right.
Or double flat, double sharp. Yeah, it's the stuff we put in front of a note to change it from what's in the key.
There you go.
And with a stacked fourth 12-tone thing, there may not be a key.
Yeah, I'd say there's no key.
There's no key to the GameCube jingle.
So the last chord is C and B flat and D, I believe. Oh, wow. So I'm like, is that a chord?
Yeah, spread out, it's like 2/7, right?
Yeah, true. Is that right? I think I have that right off the top of my head. It's been a while.
It's certainly memorable. All right, so with that, is there anything else we want to say about the album, or do we want to kind of shift into some more musical vocabulary and fun musical concepts based on videos from 8-Bit's channel?
Well, I think we'll cover this again at the end, but how do people get your album? Or is it streaming only, or can you buy it?
It'll be on Spotify and Apple Music, and it should be in all the streaming places, I guess. But Bandcamp is where you can buy it if you want to support the musical recording venture side of my work online. I think it'll be like $10, and yeah,
love Bandcamp.
Bandcamp rocks. Let's Play. It'll be if you go on my YouTuber, you'll be able to find it. 8-Bit Music Theory album. I'm sure you'll be able to find it.
Are you gonna put the whole album up for stream on YouTube on your channel?
Yeah, I think so.
Great. And of course, we'll be including, links to the YouTube channel and all the appropriate links for the album in our show notes, especially since at that point the album will most likely have released.
True, I'm talking about it in future tense, but we're speaking to you from the past.
Yes.
A lot of time travel going on here.
All right. So do we want to just kind of take it from the top and talk about Motif a little bit first?
I do. I'm psyched. I'm gushing. Before recording, I said I wouldn't gush, but holy crap, 8-Bit. You are bringing the key musical vocabulary as well as some fun obscure stuff to an audience that just loves game music, but maybe doesn't have the tools for analysis to understand why they love it. And I think one of my favorite things about your videos is you'll really break down a concept and then you'll just be like, ooh, right there, that's it.
And here are a few different examples.
Yeah, and that mix of passion and knowledge is for me, a lot of people who have been following our website for years know my big thing is I write about game music. I've got a bazillion soundtrack reviews and I'm proud of them. But sometimes I will discuss a concept and not really give a lot of context behind the concept. And I found that to be problematic for readers, and so I'm thinking over here anyone who's confused, man, you just go watch 8-Bit Music Theory, get your education in the most fun way possible.
Oh man,
and you're good to go.
Yeah, well, I maintain that there's nothing more exciting than music theory, which I know is a hot take, but it's what could be better? It's because music is the best thing in the world. There's nothing that makes you feel better than good music. And so then being able to understand music better, the more I learn about music, the more I appreciate and enjoy music. There's not especially when you're starting out and you're young as a musician, I feel like you meet a lot of people who have this idea that music theory is counter to enjoyment or counter to, I'll know too much and then I won't be able to appreciate my music or whatever, or I won't be able to be creative or whatever.
I don't like this chord progression, and now that I know how to recognize it, the song is ruined for me.
Right.
No.
But that has not been my experience, I guess.
Well, let's start with one of the most sort of basic concepts that I think people can latch onto, which is the concept of motif. There's a longer version of that term, which is leitmotif, which is spelled funny and usually refers to character theme or concept in media. But simply put, and your definition in your Pokemon Mystery Dungeon video is really good. Motif is a melody that's recurring, but it doesn't always have to be exactly that. And so I'd like to start by talking about your Pokemon Mystery Dungeon video. I think that's Explorers of Sky/Time/Darkness.
Yeah, motif's big in video games. I mean, I know you just mentioned the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon video, but the example I always think of first is the Super Mario World soundtrack, where every theme is using the same melody. Bam, bam, ba ba bam, ba dum, ba dum, ba ba dum, and then the Ghost House theme is da 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 da. It's the same theme but just ghostified, and it's
the watery one is sort of slowed down and mellowed out, and then the dungeon one is minor key and even diminished at one point, I think.
It's a great musical what's the word I'm looking for? It's a great musical wow, I'm really blanking on my word right here. That sucks. It's mirroring the way that Mario as a character is static and the levels around him change as you play the game. The theme is static, and the different contexts that you view the theme in affect how you perceive it. But Mario is always Mario, and the theme is always the theme, So there's a lot of different reasons why you would want to use motifs, and I think in video game writing, partially it's a cohesion thing where if you don't have to write 20 new melodies, why would you? You know what I mean? It brings the whole soundtrack together where it's all about one thing, one musical thing, and it's always a cool moment if you notice oh, I didn't realize it at first, but that is the same theme. That's always a cool moment when you're playing a game.
Yeah, there's so many different elements to it. There's the recognition. Another point that you bring up in the Mystery Dungeon video that I think is great. all the different things, all the different ways you can change a motif to bring different emotions, different feels to it.
Yeah. Well, that soundtrack particularly, that's why I picked that topic, was because I was thinking like this motif is so perfectly written to be transformed in so many different ways. Like if your motif is like a C major triad or something, there's only there's going to be a limit to how much you can change it without it losing what made it the motif in the first place. But it's been a long time since I made this video, so I'm blanking now. But I think the main motif was like a sus kind of chord, right?
One of them was. There's 3 identified motifs: one for sky, one for darkness, one for time. And the opening music gives you all 3, and then you give multiple examples of how each motif is used. And I think the big one for me was the darkness theme had it was drop down a major third and then up either major or minor 7th. So it was very distinct. Yeah. But then you showed one where you could use darkness but make it it didn't have to stay dark, because you were what the mind remembers is a relatively small dip down and then a big jump up. So then it turns into a fourth and an octave. It'd be D, A, and then the upper A. And so, now I can put it in a major key.
And now it can sound happier.
Yeah. I just that explanation, I don't know, I think I can understand that. I've understood that intuitively my whole life, but I've never had that spelled out for me in a way where I was aha. And this is what I'm talking about, where no matter your level of prior knowledge of music theory, your analysis is just so strong.
Right. And that particular point in the video, it's just really, really well illustrated too, because you go through, you play the different intervals and you show how they change in that example. And you can just easily hear and see, because of the transcription, exactly what the change is and how it sounds.
I'm glad to hear that. First of all, I want to apologize for not remembering having you re-explain my video to me. Every time I finish a video, it just floats out of my brain, and I'm never have to think about that again. No, but
so this is the real pop quiz. Do you remember your own work?
Yeah, that's probably way harder than the pop quiz in store for me later. No, I think I'm, because I've I don't know if it's just the little experience I had trying to show people cool stuff about music and have me be do you hear it? I'm no, not really. I'm very aware of how difficult it is to actually I'm aware that I'm talking about one fraction of a second in a piece of music with 6 instruments and being no, but listen to this one thing. So I try and make it as clear as possible. Here, I'll play it on its own on the keyboard, and then let's look at the sheet music a little bit, and then let's listen to the tune, and then maybe we'll listen to it again after I finish talking about it, if that makes sense to do for the flow of the video. So I'm glad to hear that it does make sense when you watch it.
Yeah.
When you're deep in it, it can be easy to forget that not everyone has 100 hours listening to this one tune.
I think another one that's big, and for us at RPG Fan, obviously the Final Fantasy series is enormous. I think musically it's probably half of most people's musical diet among our readers.
RPG music diet, yes.
Yeah, Final Fantasy certainly dominates it, probably half, I'd say, for a lot of people I know. And so some of the big battle themes that are out there, you think of Clash on the Big Bridge from 5, which you did a video on. The final battle music, which is technically 4 songs, Dancing Mad, which I want to talk about. And then, of course, FF7's One Winged Angel. These are sort of big pieces. And Dancing Mad, we've probably talked about ad nauseum between written and verbal / podcast forms on the site. But there is a ton in there that I honestly have never noticed myself or noticed anyone else noticing. And that is primarily in the form of how often Kefka's character theme shows up in Dancing Mad.
In various forms, yeah.
I knew it did, but I really only knew it in the last form, the rock band form. I knew that the melody was the 7/8 sped up version of his and then the big call out, the bum ba-da-dum ba-dum, they give that call out, but in the organ solo section, you point out that the bass part of the organ plays his his main theme first in a major key, and then as the song moves toward it, it just goes from that same major to minor, and then it's played again in minor, and it's the exact same notes as the melody. I've probably heard that song 300 to 400 times and have literally never picked up on that in the bass line, and there you are just knowing it, and I'm just like, who is this man? Like, how do you do this?
Oh, well, it's a lot of staring at sheet music, but that was a very exciting find for me, because a lot of, like, when I'm making a video, a lot of times I don't really know what the video is going to be about until I've transcribed a bunch of music and I've been staring at it for a long time, because it's like I never want to make a video about something that I'm not excited to learn about too. You know what I mean? Like, everything I make, I try and, like, it's always, I'm trying to figure out something for myself, and if I manage to figure something out, then I'll kind of document the process almost. But then it's the Dancing Mad. It was like, this is such an iconic, very cool piece of music. I transcribed the whole thing and then just was staring at it for a long time, trying to figure out, like, what all the cool stuff about it. And I'm sure there's lots of cool stuff that I didn't manage to figure out too. But yeah, that was a big find. I remember being very pumped when I was like, that's his theme in the bass, and, like, just like going from major.
It's like a musical Easter egg, Yeah,
you're
like,
exactly.
Oh, I found it.
Well, and, like, it has so much symbolism with, he's coming down in this angelic form, and you have the fugue, very obviously evoking church with the organ and everything. And then it's like, oh no, but he's still the most evil person in the world. Like, having the major shift to minor, like, it's so when it all comes together, like, this is Uematsu's just a genius, just yeah. I mean, I'm sure this is called RPG fans, so I'm sure I'm sure you guys.
We know he's a genius, but sometimes we don't remember or know why he's a genius.
Right.
So.
It's always good to have, like, very specific evidence like that.
Yeah, true. It's always fun to point out particular reasons.
And I love how much that video on Dancing Mad fits into our particular discussion about motif, because Kefka, like, asked a bunch of RPG fans. We did an entire, like, villains episode on him. Like, a lot of people are interested in him as a character, and musically that's definitely reflected in Dancing Mad. Like you just said, we get his theme creeping in, even though you've got this organ fugue thing going on. He's kind of attempting to transcend his roots. They're creeping back, and it's just really interesting to listen to.
I can't imagine writing that whole that whole soundtrack. Like, man, how did you just sit down and come up with that? That's crazy.
Yeah. We should also add, for those of you who aren't familiar with his channel, 8-Bit actually has a 3-part video on analyzing Final Fantasy VI's music. Dancing Mad is the third and final part, but all 3 parts really help you see a broader picture of what Uematsu did with that soundtrack.
That was so good.
Very good. And a lot of character, like, there's a lot of character theme focus. So you want to talk about motif. I mean, you do, I think it's part 2, the one where you look at, like, Coin Song and Edgar and Sabin's theme. Like, so you get more about motif throughout all 3 parts. But man, Dancing Mad is just...
You get Kefka's whole journey.
Yeah, you really do.
I just had planned to do one video on Final Fantasy VI and talk about motifs kind of generally, and then it's like, oh well, I have to talk about Dancing Mad if I'm talking about this the soundtrack. And then I realized, like, writing about it a little bit, thinking like, oh, this is going to be worth its own video on, so I'll do a 2-parter. One half just the rest of the soundtrack, then the second half Dancing Mad. And then working on the first half, I realized that I had like 3,000 words of stuff to say about Coin Songs. Like, oh, okay, well, I guess this should be its own video too. So that definitely there was a lot of scope creep on that particular project. But I'm glad it's a cool trio.
Good on you for figuring it out in advance. I'm tired of trilogies that have a part 3 broken into parts 1 and 2. Very mad at Attack on Titan right now. The final season, part 3.
Oh yeah. So dumb.
That stuff makes me mad. So good on you for having the insight to see you had to split up ahead of time.
Yeah.
And they are, I mean, I think they're broken up really well in terms of, digesting and learning a little bit more about motif each time.
Well, I'm glad. I'm I'm glad it worked out well. I feel like I'm always kind of throwing things together, but I'm glad it worked out.
Did you want to talk about the Zelda 2 video with the rhythm analysis? Because that's a relatively new video, and percussion, drums is like where you got your start, right, 8-Bit?
Yeah, I'm a drummer. I went to school to learn how to play drums, jazz. I got a jazz degree in drums, and when I started the channel, I'd get comments being like just assuming that I'm a piano player, and I was so flattered. Like, oh, I must know what I'm talking about if they assumes I'm a piano player. But yeah, I'm playing drums on the new album too. I don't know if I mentioned that before, and that's my
great.
primary instrument.
It's so wild to see someone who's so clearly aware of melody and harmony when you're playing an instrument whose chief focus is rhythm.
Well, there's a lot of there are lots of drummers that don't focus on that with good reason, because it's not super relevant to what you're doing. But I think having the ear to hear shifts in harmony, and like, I feel, well, as a drummer, your role is kind of to support whatever's happening in the song. And so you do have to have kind of a level of like emotional intelligence to be a good drummer, to say like, I can feel that the song is trying to be triumphant. And if I'm not, drumming in a way that is triumphant, it's going to completely kill it. Like if the drums aren't with the vibe, it's impossible for the other instruments to make up for it, kind of. So I definitely have always, like, being in bands and stuff, always had an ear out for like, how are the chords moving, what are the chords evoking, what is the melody kind of trying to convey, and then how do I support that, I guess. So I don't know, this is trying to reverse engineer why I'm a theory nerd and a drummer, so I could be way off, but
no, that's a great point, and I think that comes across a lot when you discuss the tempo music from Zelda 2, because you go through and you kind of show like how the melody is moving and harmony are moving, when they're ascending, descending, and you kind of break down like how the emphasis and the rhythm helps support that.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting one, because all that like NES music where there's no drums, when you get a really rhythmic piece of music and it's just the rhythm of these different melodies interacting, that's super interesting. And then also I had been thinking while I was making, like just before making that video, I had been thinking a lot about kind of trying to classify rhythm, like, because especially playing drums, you kind of have a sense of like, oh yeah, if you anticipate the beat, it feels a certain way, and if you delay the beat, it feels a certain way. But I had never heard any kind of codified terminology to really understand that. And as a theory nerd, as a professional theory nerd, there's nothing more than I love codifying with terminology. So I had been like working out this conception of rhythm of like, okay, well, what happens if you anticipate a beat or delay a beat or whatever, and then that piece of Zelda 2 music is like so rhythmic, and that's kind of like the draw, is that like da 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 da, it's like, and that whole soundtrack really is very rhythmically interesting, and so just like fit perfectly onto what I was thinking about, and that was a pretty quick episode to write too, actually. Yeah, but so that was me trying to figure something out. How do I like put this into words in a way that I can have like write down and be able to point to and go, okay, if I want my tune to sound such and such a way, this is how I need to change the rhythm, and yeah, I'm glad people seem to dig it. People other than me seem to dig it.
Yeah, I think a lot of work in syncopation, and like you said, either anticipating or delaying, like just an eighth note before or after one on the bar, like makes such a difference.
Yeah.
And Zelda 2, like that soundtrack, like loves playing with that idea.
Totally.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the discussion at the beginning, just to kind of provide some background, is it's sort of, if you are familiar with playing an instrument, there are certain beats in a measure that are considered a little bit more stable, and certain beats in the measure that are considered a little bit less stable, and you can kind of lead into those beats, which Zelda 2 does a lot. And actually that kind of leads into my next question, which is what do we think the takeaways from that rhythm video, if we had to kind of scope it down to a couple key points, like if we wanted to go listen to some future RPG music for a rhythm episode, what are like the top couple things to keep in mind to listen for rhythmically?
I think I would pay attention to kind of like comparing action music as opposed to very subdued music, and kind of see like where are they rhythmically different, because I think that, you know, rhythm is such a huge part of music, and it's kind of really hard to talk about in a theory way, especially compared to chords where you can say where it's like a math formula basically. You have your 1 and your 4 and then you go to the 2, and but rhythm is kind of like, yeah, you know, it just feels a certain way. But if you like, you know, listen to action-y music, you'll find a lot more anticipations, and a lot of anticipations of beat 3 specifically. Like, I think the beat in the bar matters a lot too. So that kind of like bum, 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 bum. You would never have like a slow, you know, Home Village theme with that kind of pounding, don't, go, rhythm underneath.
Right, with that pattern. Yeah. So all about kind of picking out the patterns and kind of what types of tracks you hear them in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And anything, I feel like there's a tradition of stupid time signatures in RPG boss music too.
Yes.
You could probably keep an ear out for.
You have a whole separate video on odd time signatures, including the infamous Ganondorf fight in Ocarina of Time that does a 23/16 that marries a 13 and a 10 beat pattern, which is just
even
glorious.
Listening to the tune a bunch, it's so hard to feel that beat still. You know, like that's That
15/8 in Mother 3, where that's so crazy that it's like you time your critical hits on hitting one on the beat, and it's like, how are you ever going to know one on that?
Yeah, totally. Well, and that's such a cool. I've never played the game. I really, it's on my list of like, you know, figure out how to get this thing emulated. But that's such a cool concept to me of like, you know, RPG battles, but then there's a rhythmic element to the mechanics, and so then when the bosses get harder, the music gets rhythmically more like complicated. Like, I love that. I think that's such a sick idea. But yeah, so that ends up in some absolutely ridiculous time signatures. That was a real pain in the butt to transcribe.
Way bad. So if you want to get some practical application and a good feel for rhythm, play Mother 3.
Yeah. Let the game train you.
All right, so we've looked at motif, we've looked at, you know, some basic rhythm analysis, we've looked at odd time signatures. Now, one of the big things in a lot of your music theory is looking at chord progression, chord structure, and one of the most interesting things, one of the things that I think people hear it but don't always know that they've heard what they heard, but it stands out, is the experience of modulation or key change within a song. And you picked one particular game that had a whole bunch of modulation within the same game for a lot of character and environment themes. And that was a recent RPG, Octopath Traveler, with music by Yasunori Nishiki. We've covered the heck out of it. Alongside its OST, it had some band arrangements, a 16-bit arrangement, a live concert Blu-ray. We've been all over this soundtrack.
Break and boost.
Yeah, the break boost and break boost and beyond, like so much good stuff. And sadly, I don't think I once mentioned key change or modulation in all my reviews, and I'm like, I'm missing something important here. And so I wanted to go back and just look at some of the songs, and not just how you feel it, but also like when you modulate key, like when you change key, the destination, what you're changing to matters a lot. Like, did you move up a whole step? Are you going to do a circle of the minor third jumps? Will you go up a whole fourth? Like, how you do the key change matters and sometimes means something in context to the music.
Yeah, definitely. What key you change to has a big effect emotionally, and then how you change as far as I always think of it in terms of like either being a very smooth change or a very, very sudden change. Both are totally, both can be good options depending on what you want. And there are good examples of both in the soundtrack of just like, if you're chugging along in one key and then you just go, bam, we're up a minor third. Like that's, you know, that has a huge effect. It's a big shock and sounds very epic, I guess you could say. Whereas like if you really take your time of like in these 8 bars, we kind of leave the key and then it's a little bit up in the air and then we settle back in and you're in a new key and you like barely even know, but it does have this slight effect on the music as far as, you know, oh, it just feels a little lighter or something. Like I think that kind of thing is super interesting. And the soundtrack was, just after transcribing some of the themes, I was looking at like every tune almost changes key. Like this is crazy. So I thought it was a good candidate for a key change video.
If I recall, I think Frostlands, which is like probably my favorite song on that soundtrack, does the minor 3 hop across the whole like that's the whole thing. It's the same song, and then you just jump up. And then you just jump up.
Right. Oh, I remember that now. Yes.
But then there were other songs where you pointed this out, and I never really paid attention to this, like growing up and looking at classical music. This idea that a good transition, if you're going to do a soft transition for your modulation, is the chord or the 2 chords before it are functional harmony in both the key you were in and the key you're about to be in. And you do really good analysis on this when Nishiki's doing these softer transitions. Like, what does it look like? Like the whole like fake you out experience.
Well, I love stuff like that because it's they're called pivot chords, the chords that kind of make sense in one key, and then when you shift keys retroactively, it's like, oh, they made sense in this key too. It like sets up the key change really well, and it can be very smooth. And I always like just the puzzle of it. I find so interesting. Of like, if you have these 2 keys and you want to get from one to the next, like what chords could you pick that would sound natural in both that would make the transition work? Like that's a very it's a good marriage of like the mathy kind of analytical part of my brain and the music, emotional creative part, just coming together perfectly. So that I always find that interesting to see.
Can you give some examples of both?
Yeah, sure.
Types of key change in Octopath.
Let me pull up my transcriptions here. This has been a long time since I made this video too. So I remember in is it the Warrior Ulbrich, his theme. It goes, he's in D minor it starts and it's just like strong in D minor, and then it just like hops into F minor kind of right away, up a minor third. And the same theme, just up a minor third. And so it's like, even though it's the same theme, same 6 bars of music, it's sounds so fresh and energetic and exciting. And part of that's the orchestration too, I'm sure. But just hopping between D minor and F minor at a moment's notice is jarring, but in a effective way.
Lending some energy. So if you notice that, listeners, toward the beginning of Ulbrich's song.
Yeah, you can hear it within the first 30 seconds. You hear the shift and you go, oh, what was that I just heard and felt? And that is modulation.
But my favorite example, in the Flatlands, there's so you start in the key of D major, and it's very major key. It's not, the harmony's not weird or anything, or not super weird at least, and it chugs along in D major for a while, and then it switches to G minor. But the thing that I like that's so cool about it is that the G minor is foreshadowed in the beginning section, because in the key of D, a G minor chord is a minor 4 chord. In the 4 chord, you'd usually have a G major in the key of D, but they use a minor one, and that's like an established harmonic sound that everybody knows. Everyone, even if you don't know, you know it. Everyone's heard it before,
Right, you put in that B flat and you get this Dorian mode in the melody and all that.
Yeah, and it's a little like nostalgic or emotional, that's kind of like the almost like over. If I play a little keyboard, I wonder if you'll hear me. Let me see. Do you hear this coming through?
Right? Yes.
So it's kind of like the classic, almost like old Hollywoody, like very like pretty emotional kind of resolution.
Right, the minor 4 resolving to 1.
Yeah.
You covered that also in the Kakariko theme video.
Yeah, that's right. But so anyways, using this, you're borrowing a chord from outside the key, but in a way that you still feel like you're in the key of D. You don't feel like you're modulating at all. But then to modulate to G minor later, it kind of takes you a sec of like, oh, a G minor chord, I heard that before. That's the minor 4 chord. You still kind of feel like you're in D. And it takes until a couple bars in to go, oh, wait, no, we're in a new key now. So that kind of like foreshadowing move I thought was super interesting.
So jumping off of that, a part of what makes modulation work is understanding, and even if you don't understand it on sort of a cognitive and rational level, just feeling the sense of functional harmony as we understand it, whether it's in classical form or a more like modern simple form. And again, reference to a video you just posted that shows a lot of really good simple harmony analysis. There's Hades in there that made me really happy. You put Good Riddance in there. Just such a good. That was bless you for doing that, by the way. But for all the great functional harmony in the world, sometimes there's this thing that exists that we refer to as non-functional harmony, which is its own wild world. And for you as, sort of a jazz fusion specialist, I imagine you have quite a good sense for what non-functional harmony is. But you showcase the concept of non-functional harmony using the compositions of Yasunori Mitsuda in what is probably one of the most celebrated RPGs of all time, Chrono Trigger.
Mm-hmm. And a very highly celebrated soundtrack too.
Yes. Very and interestingly, Mitsuda didn't compose that whole soundtrack. There's
that's right.
About 30% contribution, I think, is Uematsu. But pretty much all the non-functional harmony comes from Mitsuda's contributions, which I think there must have been something intentional with Mitsuda's, compositional style and intent for this game. And so I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about, what you recognized and how you first recognized it when you listened to this soundtrack. And also if we could, consider some of the examples you gave. I think, is it Zeal Palace? I don't know the name of the song. It's the dungeon that you run through, the Black Omen or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Dun 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 bum bum bum. Like those chords are all over the place.
Yeah. Well, that Yasunori Mitsuda's one of the. I think he has maybe one of the strongest kind of compositional voices in the video game composer world, as far as you can really tell when it's him behind a tune. He has so many little the that kind of thing.
We actually, one of our colleagues labeled that the Mitsuda slide.
Well, yeah, because he uses it everywhere, and it's it's awesome. But so he has such a distinct musical sensibility, which I think is kind of rare in game composers, just from the nature of, if you're scoring a bunch of different games, you're always trying to think about what's best for the game. You're trying to adapt your style to the thing you're working on. And not that Mitsuda doesn't do that, but just he still manages to hold on to this very specific kind of sound. And so I think part of that sound is minor 9 chords, which would be that kind of thing, where you have a minor chord with the flat 7 and the 9th on top. It's super colorful, kind of dark kind of sound. And then he likes to move them around he just likes to chuck chords at you with complete disregard for any sense of key or whatever, I'm being a little facetious, I guess, but he's so I noticed, just listening through the soundtrack, I'm like, wow, those chords are coming out of nowhere. So I'm trying to transcribe them and what is that movement? That sounds crazy. So, and then that led to non-functional harmony. How does it work? How would you, how do you talk about it in a modern kind of video game setting? And a lot of times it has to do, I think, with making sure that there are clashing notes between two chords, really searching out, if this chord has a G in it, I want the next chord to have a G flat, so that they don't work together, and that kind of jarring effect, using that to create this a jarring effect. That's a poor way to put it, but you know what I mean.
Well, the other thing you point out about non-functional harmony is there's a lot of these 4-measure or 4-chord sections that just turn into what you call 2-chord vamps, right? You just got the one chord and then the next chord and then back to the first chord and then back to the second chord, and then you might change it up. But that back and forth is almost this sort of almost like a call and response. So you're teaching the listener, you have this sound and then you have this very distinct different sound. You do that twice and then you go and do something different again.
Right.
It's like you teach the listener just long enough. This is what I'm doing. Oh, now I'm going to do this other thing.
And there's also I think you get this a lot in more simple chord progression kind of pop tune things too, where you're not sitting on one chord, you're repeating whether it's 2 or 4 chords or whatever, but in repeating this sequence of chords over and over, it turns into a meta chord, kind of just one kind of sound that pervades the whole thing. So like if you have a movement like to like that's a dissonant shift between those two chords, but if you move back and forth between them over and over, that kind of dissonance becomes the sound that underpins the whole tune. And that was Secret of the Forest, I think, those two.
Yep.
If memory serves.
And you can recognize it.
Mm-hmm. Because
which is the really nice part.
Like, the melody's great, but really what that song is that chordal movement. Like, that is what people are drawn to, I think. And that's kind of the point of the tune, as far as I can tell. So, and then, of course, like you said, it goes off into other crazy stuff, but it takes a lot of time to establish, like, this chord movement. It starts with like just the chords and arpeggios, and then the melody comes in only after you've heard that shift back and forth a couple times. And it really, I think when you're dealing with dissonant stuff, you have to be careful to introduce it like very intentionally to the listener in a way where they'll be able to accept it, unless you just want to be weird.
You can hear that happening over and over in the Chrono Trigger soundtrack. I can think of several songs where you have that little introduction and that whole process happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think for people who want to try their hand at composition, if you're going to attempt this sort of 2-chord vamp non-functional harmony, it is really important to build an established sound before you introduce the melody, and then be very careful about crafting the melody. Because if you take the 2 chords from Secret of the Forest and try to write your own melody around it, like, the chances that you're going to fail spectacularly are just so high. Like, statistically, right? You could try to do anything around that. It's probably going to sound garbage unless you're really thinking about what you're putting and where and when. And Secret of the Forest is one of the most perfectly crafted melodies as far as I'm concerned. But I think part of what makes it good is, if you play that melody outside the context of the chord progression, it's still good. But it's the chord progression that, like, and it's clear that he wrote the melody around those 2 chords, that it's just like, oh,
it all works together.
It's like super bright, even though it's also like a dark, like, there's just something.
Right. Well, it's just like, that's how it's a really deep piece of music, because it does get past like, major chords are happy and minor chords are sad. It's like this whole amalgamation of different things that are all balancing together to create this very specific, mysterious, all like ancient vibe that's just so perfect. And yeah, it's like when if you think of like a major scale, if you're in the key of C, 7 of the 12 notes that you have available to you are going to fit within the key, and only 5 aren't. So like, the odds are on your side. But if you're writing above, like a G flat major to F minor 9 vamp, it's like, oh, you only have like 3 notes that work with that will sound good over both of those chords.
Right. So you hold those notes, and the rest can be quick transitions at best.
Yeah, and the way he toes the line between the 2 chords with that melody in a way where, if you, like you said, if you play the melody by itself, it doesn't sound bad. It's like, oh, that's a melody, that's great. Like, the fact that he could pull that off in between on that tightrope is really impressive to me. And I tried to do I remember that was like an early video on the channel. It's been years since I made it, but I still remember I'd have a little bit where to emphasize, like, if you're trying to write a melody around this kind of vamp, really try be conscious of what notes will fit over both chords and focus on those. And if you can find like a pentatonic scale or like a triad that'll fit over both. And so I took the melody to All Star by Smash Mouth and made it fit over I think it was the Secret of the Forest chords or some other like crazy 2-chord vamp. And I like went in with the Chrono Trigger sound font and like made it, try to make it sound like the original soundtrack as much as possible. And I still get comments on that video being like, that example sounded kind of like Smash Mouth. Like, yes.
Yep.
Yes, it did. Because the point being that melody is very, like, there's very few notes in the melody. Like, if you think of a pop song, pop melodies usually don't use too many notes nowadays. It's usually either like a pentatonic scale where there's 5 notes being used at best, or sometimes a lot less than that. So taking like a pop melody and changing it to the right key to fit over these 2 chords, that was my little experiment that I did.
Okay, last bit of educating our listeners with music theory language. Though you invented a term here. You gave a good label to one. We've been talking about chord progressions, functional harmony, and non-functional harmony. there's this concept of cadence where there's like it's sort of an established thing. And like, I always think of like minor 2-5-1 being like the way to resolve a song classically, like secondary dominance and all that. But you often, in probably half a dozen videos, you've pointed out the Andalusian cadence, which you also will point out that's the hit the road jack cadence. So if you're in A minor, it's like A minor, G, F, E major. You're just descending down from the minor 1. But then if you add one more chord to it, you get this chord progression that appears in some modern songs. I think you pointed out While My Guitar Gently Weeps uses an example, and then Chicago's 25 or 6-4 uses it. But most people will probably know it from the Green Day song Brain Stew. So you refer to that as the Brain Stew cadence. And it adds a chord in there. I think it's 1 flat 7, and then you do the natural 6 before the flat 6 and 5. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. It's cool. It's that's one of those things. There's certain things in music that just are inherently satisfying, and for whatever reason that chord progression just works. And so it's like kind of no wonder that you see it used in all these different tunes like exactly the same way, because it just works. Like you listen to it and you're like, yep, I want to keep hearing that. That's great. And it could just keep going forever and ever. Like, there's something about when music descends, especially by step like that, where it feels natural, it feels satisfying, and then landing on that E major just wants to shoot it back up to where it started. So it works in this perfect loop where it can go on for minutes on end and no one gets bored of it. And yeah, that's a good one to have in the arsenal for sure.
And again, you use the language of the Andalusian cadence and point out Brain Stew in I think more than one video, but I first recognized it in, I think it's one of your older videos, which is about Castlevania, which uses sort of classical harmonies and modern harmonies. Like that's the one where you talk about classical minor versus like a soft minor. And how like a lot of the songs in not just old Castlevania, but also like Symphony of the Night and newer, aren't afraid to happily play with both, like rock and like old school orchestral, even like, like people associate the, Bach toccata in D minor with vampires and Dracula. So it's you got to have that.
Yeah, totally. And that's such a cool, pair of styles to cramp together, smush together. And like that combination of it's kind of like what we're talking about with the 2-chord vamps, where that combination of classical and rock minor-y sounds together fuses into its own thing that sounds very like personal to Castlevania. Like it sounds very you would associate that pairing now with Castlevania music, or I would at least.
Yeah, definitely. It's part of its musical fingerprint.
Yeah, totally.
Now I'm gonna drop a hint just for you, 8-Bit. When we get to the pop quiz, there's a very specific term in music theory that I should have known as a pianist and have never known, and I learned it from your Castlevania video. I won't tell you what it is, but I do know that it's used in the song that I've picked for you, and I'm wondering if you're going to notice it.
Okay. Pressure's on.
Yeah, pressure's on in a big way. So we wanted to take some time to jump into looking at the way you make your videos, because I think there's a lot of intrigue around, well, how do you put together the things you do? And some of the things you've said so far in the interview confirm my suspicions, which means if it's true, you're a workhorse beyond compare.
Lots of transcription.
Yeah, my first question is anyone helping you transcribe, or are you pulling transcriptions that are like people have submitted like for public use? Like pretty much every video you do includes a lot of analysis of transcribed music, which means I'm assuming you're putting that all together, which sounds like a lot of work, just very time consuming.
Early on in the channel, like before the first video, or maybe like during making the first video, I kind of realized that I was going to transcribe everything myself, because I really enjoy it, to be honest. That's maybe one of my favorite parts of making the videos, is actually transcribing the music. Sometimes not, sometimes it's a big pain in the ass, but I love transcription. I love the process of it, and there's no like official scores for any of these games. There's very, very few official scores that you could get, and the transcriptions that you find online that people have already uploaded, I am way too picky to. I like when I started, I would look online for things, and then you'd notice a mistake, and then you'd end up like listening through the whole track like very meticulously to make sure that there are no mistakes, and then at that point it's like just as hard to transcribe the music yourself. So over the years of doing this, I've gone very, very quick at transcribing, especially for just like kind of basic melody, harmony, bass line, lead sheet type transcriptions. I can knock out pretty quick, depending on the song, obviously. But
what a way to master a skill. That's really cool.
Well, it's a big, like, it's like, if you're going to talk about music in at the level of depth that I think is interesting, where you're really kind of getting into the nitty gritty of, what chord is moving to what chord for this modulation, or, what the brain stew cadence, like all these things I'm picking out that I find super interesting. You really have to be looking at, my ears aren't good enough to just pick that stuff up on a listen. I've got to like work it out and write it down and look at it and then go, oh yeah, that note's going there or whatever. So I transcribe everything with very, very few exceptions. I think there was one video where I think it was a Civilization 6 video I did where the scores were actually up on the composer's website that you could buy.
Christopher Tin, great guy, and he did publish full scores for that. I think he might have done it with 4 and 5 as well. Not 5. He didn't do 5. He did 4 and 6.
Right.
But he did do another. He had like a second sort of world music album with a really big vocal hit that they, in my opinion, they should have done for Civ 5. But I'm not in charge of these things. But he's big on publishing like full transcriptions and full sheet music, which is really nice.
Well, and it was funny too because I never like ever look for that stuff, even because no one does it. But then
Austin Wintory does it, and you've done
Austin
Journey.
Wintory does it. That's true.
Yeah.
But for the Civ video, I remember like trying to transcribe this big orchestral piece and like pick out all these different parts and just being like, oh, my ears are exhausted. I've been working on this so long. It's so hard to transcribe orchestral music. And like in a fit of annoyance, I googled like Civilization scores and then found some like what I was not expecting to actually find some. But so it was like that one, and then I actually had a patron on my Patreon like message me and say, hey, for fun, a friend and I transcribed the whole Link's Awakening soundtrack. This was back pretty early on in the channel's life, so he generously donated his transcriptions for my first Link's Awakening video back in the day.
Were you able to reuse any of that submission when you did that video on the Link's Awakening remake and how the change occurred?
I can't remember now if I did or not. I think like the point of that remake video was about the orchestration more, because I thought the orchestration was just like so cool. So even like I did end up transcribing everything just to get all the instruments right and everything. But yeah, definitely being able to like copy paste this melody here saves time for sure.
and I'm interested in knowing, just for maybe semi-personal reasons, I don't do transcription, but I do some hobbyist level composition.
Sure.
And just because I don't have money to invest in it, I've been using MuseScore for years, the free software. And when I look at the screen, I look at it and I'm like, that kind of looks like he could be doing it in MuseScore, but I wonder if he's using Finale or something else. What are you using?
I'm using Sibelius.
He's using Sibelius, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that you should use Sibelius, though. I have a love-hate relationship. It's mostly hate. I have a hate relationship with Sibelius, but it's like it's the thing where you put hundreds of hours into this program and actually learn enough of the shortcuts and like the idiosyncrasies of the program that you can actually get something done relatively quickly. And it's just, am I really gonna put in that time into a new program or stick with what I know? So it's
the devil, you live with its problems.
But I've just heard that MuseScore has been getting better and better over the years. So, and it doesn't cost $1 million, and you don't have to pay a monthly subscription for it.
Which is
also
lovely.
Important, yeah.
It's kind of that's the obvious pick if you're just getting into this stuff, I think.
I know this is just speaking more generally, but I know it's also kind of allowed a lot of people to kind of put their transcriptions out there and transcribe more, which is good.
Yeah, true, right?
But, possibly not what you want if you're going into really in-depth analysis and it's easier to do it yourself.
Right. Well, every time that I have had a transcription mistake in a video, I hear about it,
Oh, yeah.
We can count on the YouTube comments for someone to say, well, actually.
Yeah, it's a machine made of thousands of people designed just to point out your errors. So I've gone pretty meticulous with my transcriptions.
Now, for the videos that you've been making more and more, and I think this is probably because you're active on Patreon and you're getting a lot of financial support and drumming up, the hype, the good hype, the real hype with your supporters. But I have noted that a lot of your videos in the last few years, you do call out either at the beginning or the end that, covering a certain topic or covering a certain franchise music is, it's a fan submitted request. I'm wondering at this point, what would you say is your ratio of videos you do because a fan submitted it versus this is something you really wanted to do? And what's one that no fan ever brought up? You were just like, I definitely need to do this. And I assume that probably comes from your earlier videos.
So what happened was when I made my Patreon page originally, I thought I'd get a couple people who could chuck in a buck or two. And so I was making the tiers for, things that you would get for supporting me. And I decided to make an insanely high tier that no one would ever subscribe to, of $10 per video. And if you're willing to subscribe that level, because every video from the beginning, people were just, oh, you need to talk about this game. Oh, you need to talk about this game. And it's just impossible to take seriously 100,000 requests, you know what I mean? So it's like, oh, this will be a good way to say, to be like, I can guilt-free ignore most people's suggestions, and just if you are this top level patron, drop a suggestion,
And then dozens of people.
Oh, man, I had no idea how many. And originally too, this is way back, within the first year making videos, I was doing it in Windows Movie Maker, making all my assets in MS Paint, and so I could crank out one a week, without not doing anything else with my life, basically. And so I was like, oh yeah, I put out 4 videos a month. So I'll say one a month. I'll do 1 video a month. That's a patron request. That'll be my thing. And then very quickly I learned how to use editing software that could actually do stuff that you needed to do, and make assets more complicated than you can make with the paint tool. And so the time it took to make a video ballooned and the quality went up as a result. But then all of a sudden it was like, oh, I'm getting maximum 2 videos out a month. And I have about 30 new requests every month from patrons. So
oh my goodness.
I took a long time. So it was kind of like a 50-50 split for a long time of I would do one for me and then one that's a request, and then one for me and then one that's a request. And then just in the last year or so, I kind of made a post. And I always got really nervous about it, of oh, I don't, these people are paying so much money and support, I don't want to let anyone down. It sucks that I have 29 people I'm letting down every month. But then every time I post about it, to be like, hey, whatever, to talk about this at all, everyone's super cool. Oh yeah, no, I don't expect, I just love what you do, and thought I'd drop a request. And people think about it way less than I do. But so, yeah. So anyway, this last year, I kind of rejiggered it so that now it's 1 in every 3 videos is going to be a requested topic. And so if that takes me 3 months to get 3 videos out, or 1 month, it'll, it's the same. But yeah, so the one video that I was kind of waiting for someone to request, because I knew that it would not get any views. And if it was a request, I could at least be well, it's a request. But the Chibi-Robo video I did was a year or two ago.
I love that video.
Oh man, I love that. It's one of my favorite games. It's so cool. Such a weird game. And the soundtrack is so bizarre and has so many great tunes on it. And it just doesn't sound like anything else that I've ever heard anywhere else. And so for so long, my wife loves Chibi-Robo too, so she'd always be like, you should make a Chibi-Robo video. I know I should, but I'm talking about Zelda this week or whatever. Something that people will actually watch. And then eventually I said, you know what, it's time. I'm doing the Chibi-Robo video. This one's for me. And I did it, and it didn't get any views. And I said, that's fine.
I actually like that video, though.
Oh, I'm glad.
And it's an example of you making that system work for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be passionate about it, or else, how do you keep that momentum? Even if even if the Patreon money rolls in heavier than you expected, like you still need passion to keep going.
Oh yeah. And I never do requests that I'm not passionate about too. Like, because I really do believe that you can find something interesting about a piece of music, any piece of music, if you look hard enough, you know. But then there's definitely music that's just like, I don't have the time to look hard enough to find something interesting, especially with, you know, getting a wave of requests in every month. So but so it's I always make sure, like, even if it's a requested topic or whatever, I like take the time to really get into the soundtrack and figure out, even if it's something, and a lot of times it is like a game that I never played or soundtrack that I would never think to look at seriously, but giving it a good hard look, you realize like, oh, that thing is really cool. Actually, I didn't realize, but that's probably why people like this soundtrack, and I didn't get it just listening to it, you know. So it's a good system to kind of keep me open to new things too. So I'm not just talking about Zelda music every video.
I'm guessing that Simple Harmony video also, I mean, that allowed you to hit a lot of people's requests.
Yeah, well, because there are patrons who have been supporting me for a long time and request the same thing every month. I do a monthly post that people comment on. That's how I get the requests, and like, so nice, like, you know, just want to request this game again. And I felt bad, like, realizing, oh man, some of these guys have been requesting the same thing for like a year. And so I was like, okay, you know, and like, it's not like I never thought to do a video on them, but like when you're looking through request things, it's just like, I don't know how to make this work. Like, this is kind of cool, but I don't know if I could talk about it for long enough or whatever. So then I had the idea, oh, okay, if I take all these games that I've looked at before and decided like, I don't know how to turn it into a full video, really, surely all of them together can combine into one, you know, into one video. And then it was a matter of like, well, so what's the topic, you know?
Yeah,
like,
what's
I don't
the
want to just be like,
theme?
yeah. And that was interesting because I did kind of realize something about myself, which is that I didn't really know what to do with Simple Harmony. Like, that was the kind of the common through line, is like, if you're just dealing with triads and like a very pop oriented, you know, like with a very pop sensibility, that's really hard. I find that really hard to analyze, where I'm like, what is going on? It's just in the key of F or whatever. He's just playing chords from the F key, but that doesn't tell you anything about why it sounds the way it does, you know. So trying to figure out a system to think about the stuff that made sense to me was really enlightening, and I ended up learning something in the process. So I'm glad for all my patrons. Big love to all the patrons.
And I'll for a second time send my thanks to whichever patrons pushed for Hades, and specifically Good Riddance, because the more Hades representation, the better. And that I'd never seen transcription of that song before, and I knew they were working from a basic harmonic structure, but I didn't realize that the two vocalists were just riding a third the whole way down the melody.
Oh, that's so funny.
Just seeing it on paper or on computer screen was so nice. So just for getting the transcription alone, I was just so thankful to see that.
No, yeah, and that's such a cool, like, stuff like that where it seems mysterious, and then when you look at it, it's actually simple, but it's just like exactly right, you know? Like, stuff doesn't have to be complicated to sound good. Sometimes it's just like the exact right choice, you know? I don't know if that makes sense, but like looking at the music, you're like, oh, it's just the melody's just hitting the fifth of every chord or whatever. It's like not complicated. So then if you're analyzing, you're like, oh, well, that's not complicated. That's boring. But then when you listen to it, it's like, oh, that's not boring at all. It sounds beautiful. Like, yeah. So that was definitely a great song.
Oh, and this is what it's doing.
That transitions well to what I had next in mind. Though I just want to comment real quick. Was it a fan request, or was it your own passion project to transcribe the that track from Mario Kart with the insane saxophone solo?
Oh, that was a passion project.
That was you wanted to subject yourself to the torture of transcribing an insane sax solo.
No, I mean, that, like, being in jazz school, you have to transcribe solos. That's part of it. So I was used to it, and I really enjoy that. Because that's such a, like, the thing that I find interesting about analyzing music generally is kind of trying to get in the composer's head. Like, why did he pick this chord? What effect does it have on the music? And when you're transcribing a solo, you're like really getting a look into the mind of someone who's composing on the spot, you know,
improvisation
in real time. It's so interesting to see like, oh, okay, he knows he's over this chord. He knows if he has the stable of tricks that he can pull out, and you, especially if you transcribe different solos from the same musician, you can really start to pull out like, okay, this is like his approach. This is how he thinks about this thing. But so I always loved transcribing solos, so that was very much like a passion. Like, oh, I'm gonna do a fun video for me, even though probably no one wants to watch a video about sax soloing. Like, that doesn't seem like a very broad subject. And that ended up being a super popular video. Like, out of nowhere. I don't know why.
I think that's another one of the well celebrated songs in Mario Kart. What's the name of that song? Something Shoal?
Dolphin Shoals.
Yeah, Dolphin Shoals. That's people love that song, so it's no wonder.
Yeah.
I just thought, wow, what a tough choice for transcription. But I guess you like that, don't you?
I like a challenge. And I always, not to brag, but I never slow things down, or very rarely. I try and do it full speed. And if I really can't get a line, I'll go back and slow down and double check stuff. But it's good. It's good practice, train your ears up.
Yeah, definitely.
You definitely are like a jazz expert. You sound like the folks I know they're just advanced level. I can't keep up. That's incredible. I would have to, if someone asked me to transcribe that sax solo, I'd need it at 30% speed, and it would take me multiple days.
We're not even going to go into if I attempted to try. I would have to sit there and okay, this is this. No. I would have to stop frequently. That kind of practice, and that I think is a good note if we're ready to sort of go on the spot and listen to some music and make some comments.
Oh yeah, I talked up a big game, and now I'm gonna get to.
Let's do it. Do you want to do yours first?
You do yours first.
Okay, great. So I'm going to tell you nothing about what it is in advance. Then we're going to listen to it, and then you tell us what you observed in the piece, and then I can tell you more about the piece, what the game is, where it came from.
Okay,
we'll have fun with it.
Sounds good.
Dun, 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 dun. All right, I have it up in 3, 2, 1, go.
Ooh. Oh yeah, like a Dorian thing. Oh, okay. So I'm hearing like a minor 1 to major 4 kind of move, and then descending down. That sounds like a dominant 2 to dominant 5 to 1 to me. No, this is like flat 6, I guess. Ooh, I like that. This is great. Oh yeah, okay. Flat 6 to 1 vamp. Then back to the head. Nice.
Yeah, and then it just repeats. The song's only 50 seconds long. But we'll let you get the repeat.
Okay, sure. I love that. That's so cool. And cool. Okay. The intro is cool. I liked, there's like the chromatically ascending bassline figure thing, and then the descending like crazy arpeggio thing on top, one going up, one going down, kind of very, very hectic. Sets the stage well. The A section, what key is this in? Let me find out my keyboard. So it's an A minor. It's here in that kind of minor 1 to major 4, A minor to D kind of thing. I shouldn't be hunting around. I should just be using my ears. And that the raised sixth of the Dorian mode is highlighted in the melody. And then I don't know if I quite got it moves from the 1 to 4 vamp into like a descending chord thing that ends on this dominant 2 to dominant 5 to mine. That's what I heard. I might be a little off with that, but that definitely had that kind of Castlevania vibe, that little classical minor-y thing. So it probably was like descending from the 4 to the 3 to the dominant 2, I guess, maybe. I don't know for sure. Anyway, goes to the B section. It was a flat 6 chord, so F major. It's a good contrast if you think of the A section as being an A minor and highlighting the F sharp note, landing on a big F natural in the bass, and in the B section is a really good contrast between the 2 sections, and it sets up, the first section is a more adventurous kind of theme because of that Dorian sound, whereas the B section is a little bit more subdued, a little bit more pretty, and a little bit more introspective maybe. And I love that it's like an inverse backbeat or something. Like if you think of the drums hitting on 2 and 4, boom, chap, boom, boom, chap, boom, boom, the bass line was going dun, 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 like hitting all the notes 3. Except for the backbeat, and so it's like where the space is, it's like you almost hear the backbeat even though it's just a chip tune.
Yeah, it's boots and cats. It's boots and cats.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You put the cat is just in your mind, man.
That's right.
But so that was cool. That was just like F to A minor, and the melody was just kind of floating around the 3rd of each chord, I believe, or the 5th, was it? No, it was floating around the 3rd, but getting that nice like B natural over an F major thing. Like that's a really nice sound. So I think that lends that enforces the kind of more emotional, the colorful sound, as opposed to the very like not rock and roll, but that original section. So what is that from? That's such a great tune. I never heard it before.
Well, real quick, first of all, pass with flying colors on the analysis.
Thank you.
Holy crap, look at the man in his element, live, doing the work. I'm freaking out. I love that you have your keyboard out. So do you know of an RPG franchise? It's called the SaGa series. It's always capital S and capital G.
Oh, okay. I've seen the name. I've never played any of the games or anything, but
so it's a long series with, it usually has trilogies or duologies within a specific system. Can you recognize, based on the sound font, do you know what system that was on?
I assumed NES.
Go a little more technically limited than NES. It's missing one sound channel that NES has.
Is it Game Boy?
It is. It's Game Boy.
Wow, man.
Yeah, that's Game Boy.
That's awesome.
Do you want to know who the composer is?
Yes, hit me.
It's Nobuo Uematsu.
Really?
This is one of his earliest works. I actually have the soundtrack signed by him. It's like my favorite of his.
Oh,
yeah.
That's so sick.
The first 3 games in the SaGa franchise, knowing that the name SaGa meant nothing to Americans in 1990, they called it Final Fantasy Legend 1, 2, and 3 on the Game Boy.
Oh,
so this is the final battle music for the first Final Fantasy Legend game. And it remains, 30 plus years later, one of my favorite pieces of music in video game music. And it's just, you've talked in multiple videos about how technical limitation pushes composers to do more with less. Which is a theme that, we've also talked about a lot on our site and in our podcast, which I think is a really important thing for people to see. I think it's one of the things that early on differentiated video game music from other media score, that technical limitation forced creativity in different ways. And so I wanted to point out in the B section of the song, it's called Furious Battle, the final battle music. In the B section, there's something happening. You got your main melody, you got your bass line, and then there's a second audio track that's doing something very frenetic, and it's either in like 16th notes or 32nd notes, depending how you want to break down things. Do you remember hearing that?
I remember the 16th note frenetic thing. I don't remember. Can I listen to it one more time?
Sure, pull it up for yourself.
Okay.
So there's a lot of arpeggiation, but sometimes it's not full arpeggiation. There's this thing where one of the 2 notes is always being repeated and the other one's changing. What's the term for that, sir?
That is a pedal point.
Yeah. And that is a term that I, a pianist who's played Toccata Fugue in D minor, did not know that term until you pointed out in the Castlevania video. And when you did, I thought to myself, that's that thing I love in the B section of Furious Battle, which is why I picked this song, because you taught me that term.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I'm glad. It's a good term. It's very, very Castlevania-y. Very. I mean, that's a very Bach thing to do. Yes. I guess if you're doing a chiptune 3 individual voices, that lends itself well to a more contrapuntal approach. So why not rip off some Bach techniques, hey?
Right. You're limited to what you can harmonize. So instead of holding one note, let's very quickly play 2 notes, and it sounds like I get to hold 2 notes.
Yeah, exactly. That's so awesome, great. Man. People I think Uematsu did so much great work post chiptune era that I think people forget how good of a chiptune composer he was, or he is. Like, his stuff, early Final Fantasy stuff, is so sick.
Yeah, I was just listening to Final Fantasy 3, which would have been his last chiptune compositional work, and like it's clear he had mastered the concept of good chiptune music by that time. Like, there's so much good on FF3.
Yeah, totally.
That is probably like one of my favorite underrated soundtracks, Final Fantasy 3.
Do you have Are you ready to hit us with your pick?
It's in email. I had to send a YouTube video, so try not to look, though.
Okay.
I'm not sure how familiar you might be. And I'm not going to have a great story behind it, but it's a composer that was covered sometimes, but not extensively on the channel. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to listen to more of their work. It was kind of the idea.
I see. Okay. Are we going to count down and play it, or?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. 3, 2, 1, and go.
Okay, it's a pretty chord. Oh, hear a little Dorian. So I'm guessing, just my instinct is to think that he's using a minor chord with the second in the chord, getting that rub between the flat third and the major second, that semitone rub. There's also definitely some using the raised sixth highlighted, or for a lighter kind of Dorian mode sound. The melody isn't scared to highlight that raised sixth either. Pretty much staying on the minor tonic, eh? Man, this is so pretty. I like the melody starts on the tonic and just kind of walks down the scale in a decorated way. Very relaxing.
It is. It's relaxing in an odd way.
Okay, here we go. So this is a lot more classical, a lot less Dorian. So that's the raised seventh in the bass, so probably like a 7 diminished chord, I'm guessing. Really, it's going from the minor 1 to the dominant 5 to the minor 1. The dominant 5 could be like a decorated in different ways, but Okay, so we changed keys, I guess.
Yep.
Up to the, I'm guessing the 4 is the new key.
There was a pretty dramatic change in that one, so that's kind of another reason I picked it.
Yeah, this composer is known for doing really fast shift, unexpected modulation, among other things.
Yep. Yeah. Definitely.
Man.
Not quite so much of it in this song.
No. A lot of his battle themes he does, though.
Yes. Oh boy.
I like that. Okay, I'm gonna try and get this modulation this time around. He's on the 2. Or he's on the 1 now. Oh, it doesn't do it again. Okay. Man, that was pretty. What key is that in? A minor again. You guys love the A minor.
I hadn't even realized we picked 2 A minor songs.
It's good though. It's cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing just from the context clues. Is this a Motoi Sakuraba tune?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep.
I never heard this before or played this game or anything, but very pretty. I like the kind of setting up the vamp with the choir and the harp with the. I think it was something like this, right? That's my guess, anyway. Like I said before, minor chord with the second in it as well. And so it kind of just stayed on that chord with the different melodies coming in. Or there's, what was the A section melody now? I can't remember it now. I remember it walked down. There was some Dorian noodling. And then it moved into this kind of, minor 1 chord, dipped down to the raised 7. That kind of thing. Jumping back and forth between the A minor, the 1 chord, and the E dominant 5 chord. That's a very classical sound because the G sharp isn't naturally occurring in the minor scale, but it's frequently borrowed for a very strong, dark resolution. And then the chord, that chord, the key change is killing me. That threw some curveballs. It was like I want to say it ended on the 4. Like it got to D minor, but I think I'm totally wrong about that.
Yeah, I haven't actually checked to see what the jump is on that.
Oh, it goes to an F diminished chord.
Yeah. To go from A minor to F diminished, where you have that A flat.
Oh man, so he does like hold on here. He ends up in B minor. I was totally wrong.
Yeah, it lands at a whole step up.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. So this is what I got so far. So he goes to an F diminished, which is kind of a, diminished chords are symmetrical. So it's kind of the same as like a G sharp diminished, like a raised 7th. You could resolve to A minor from that without too much problem, but the F in the bass is pretty jarring. And then goes back to A minor, and then we have this F sharp dominant that resolves to B minor, and that was like, whoa, where are we now? Because B minor is pretty different, especially with the minor 9 type sound. But and so then I think the last half was actually an E minor, or it moved instead of A minor. I thought it moved back to the original key, but it hopped down to E minor. Man,
that's a wild one, huh?
Cool. Yeah, that is a wild one.
It's funny because it to me it's always sounded a little more stable than it actually is. But
I mean, it's like we were saying before, where he gives you a lot of time just on that A minor at the beginning. Like you're really. Yes. There is a stability to it because it takes a long time to get any kind of crazy movements or anything.
True. So that is kind of one of the main tracks from any guess like what era of?
Yeah. Do you know what system this was on?
I'm just trying to guess from the video thumbnail here. Like probably like PS2, but
close. So originally it was a PS1 composition. It's from Valkyrie Profile, and the tune's called "Epic Poem to Sacred Death." Wow. It's like kind of one of the dramatic songs that plays toward the beginning.
That explains all the.
Yep. Doesn't it? Yeah, it explains kind of both. Exactly, that color to it and the sort of classical sound.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, Sakuraba is he's something of a prog rock god. So for his battle themes, he kind of goes nuts. But then for the slower pieces, he does push back to classical and even sort of a Baroque sound. Yeah. Like he really likes synth choir and pipe organ, and he likes harp a lot as well. And so like he definitely has like among people who really like Sakura, but like he really sort of stays within his wheelhouse, especially for the Star Ocean and Valkyrie profile franchises. And he also does like half of the Tales of series, at least up until the year like 2010, I think. And like he's got like a defined sound.
Totally.
But then he gets like what he does with his sound is so very like it gets more and more intense over the years, I've found. But a lot of people, I think you and I included, Hilary, like Valkyrie Profile 1 and 2 like remain like some of his best works.
I would say so for sure.
Yeah. And I think his slower songs come out better there than some of his other games.
Yes.
That's what I love about this one. Like for him to hold that, just hold on A minor that long, you feel like, all right, this song's not really going anywhere. So that when it does go somewhere, you're like, oh. And then when it goes somewhere unexpected, it's like, oh. Like two layers of oh.
It really gets you. Man, I love, he has some slow tunes on the Dark Souls soundtrack that are really beautiful and like totally now like I can totally hear the similar kinds of sounds between this tune and like Nameless Song or those kinds of Dark Souls tunes, which I'm more familiar with. So I'll have to check these soundtracks out.
Yeah, please do. I was actually just about to mention the Souls franchise and that did music for that as well.
I read your mind. No, yeah.
So, yes.
Man, this is a fun game. I liked I was a little bit worried. But
well, maybe if you ever wanted to come back and be a repeat guest, we can pull out some even crazier pop quiz songs for you someday.
Or do more of a standard episode and let you pick some music that you think fits the theme.
Ooh.
Oh yeah. You can pop quiz us, see if we learned enough from you and your channel.
Oh dear. Uh-oh.
We're screwed, Hill. We're gonna fail.
F minus. No.
F diminished.
Oh, geez.
That's my music theory joke for the day. I'm done.
Beautiful. Well timed. Love it. Yeah, well, I feel like we covered a lot and we gave kind of like a basis for some different concepts to think about when we're listening to music on future Rhythm episodes for listeners and us. So that was awesome. Thank you so much again.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Yeah. I'm going to move on to a little bit of housekeeping before we go. So just a reminder, links to the music are going to be available in the show notes as usual, as well as links to all of 8-Bit's work and the album. So please remember to check out the show notes. And similarly, please remember to like, rate, all of that stuff on your favorite podcast listening tools. That really helps us. And as far as upcoming episodes, our next one at this point is Songs from the Future. So that's going to be covering RPG songs or soundtracks that have a sci-fi kind of futuristic feel. And then we have a console-based episode on the Super Nintendo coming up as well. So that should be fun. Some more good listening. And as far as contacting people on the panel, the best way to reach me, Hilary, is Discord. I'm EP Fire there. If you'd like to get in touch about the episode or any questions, where can people reach you, Pat?
I'm on Twitter at Gameadactyl. It's like pterodactyl, but game instead of PTER.
And what's the best way to reach you, 8-Bit?
Yeah, YouTube, 8-Bit Music Theory. I have a Twitter that I rarely use, but you can find me there if you'd like, at 8-Bit Music Theory. And that's basically it, yeah.
And don't forget, if you want to support him, you can get in on his Patreon. That'd be a good way to get, if you want to get his ear directly.
True. That's definitely the most expensive way to get a hold of me, but or maybe not. You could drive a plane to my house, I guess.
And I feel very spoiled now. I got to pick a song and have you listen and comment on it without being a member of the Patreon yet.
True. Well, I hope my analysis didn't disappoint.
Not at all. All right. Well, any last questions, comments before we close out? Any last thoughts about kind of advice for just sitting down and talking about a song in general?
Always be thinking about why it sounds the way it does and why it feels the way it does, and don't get lost in the notes of as far as if you're looking at a bunch of notes, you might think, oh, there's an F here. That doesn't work with this chord. You might think really hard, draw some conclusions about using an F over a B minor chord or whatever. But then when you listen to the actual music, you might realize that you don't even notice that F note for whatever reason. So it's easy to get really deep in the weeds and forget the experience of actually listening to the music that you're talking about. That's something that I had to learn and always try and keep in mind when I'm making videos. So that'd be my advice.
Great insight.
Yeah. Hey, we always close out our show with a bonus track, and we love to let, when we interview a guest, we love to let them pick a bonus track. Would you like us, because I know I would like us to pick one of the songs from your new album.
Or like a snippet or preview. If you have something like that available. If you don't, that's okay.
Yeah, I can send you. You said this is coming out after
May
the album's
23rd.
out anyway, so I can send a little sneak preview, no problem. Let's see. What should we listen to though? What are you guys in the mood for? Slow, fast?
Did you do Chibi-Robo?
I did do something for Chibi-Robo. Okay, well,
damn right you did. Can we do Chibi-Robo?
Yeah, this is
I think did we cover Chibi-Robo on the site?
I can't remember.
If you know, it's a Maiden's thoughts. It's the dog chew toy worm Sophie who's in love with Drake Redcrest. It's her like theme.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
The arrangement, it's a very like hectic, harmonically bizarre tune that I think captures the tempest that is a young chew toy's heart and love. And I tried to accentuate that wildness with the arrangement. So it's kind of a weird one, but it was really fun to play and really fun to write. So hopefully people dig it.
Oh,
Very
sure.
Cool.
One thing I've got to share that I can't get out of my head, since like watching things on the channel, is definitely Koji Kono's video game Mozart and Uematsu's video game Beethoven. I can't unsee it.
Yeah, right? Yeah, exactly.
That is so very, very on point.
Yep. Especially when you went back, the Hyrule Castle. I was looking at just the phrasing and kind of the structure of it, and I was like, wow, yep.
Yeah, that Hyrule Castle video was really good.
Oh, thank you.
Video game
That's
Mozart.
such a great tune. Yeah. No, it's that comparison just feels like it gets more and more true the more I listen to both of them.
Yep.
All right, so what's the song title to this one again?
This one's called A Maiden's Thoughts.
All right, so for our outro, our bonus track, we are hearing A Maiden's Thoughts, arranged by 8-Bit on the new album Let's Play.
Let's go have a listen, and thank you all for listening to this episode. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
Are you going to be able to play it over the audio feed, Hill? Or should we just have him download the song?
I think maybe we should just give MP3s. I think that might work best.
Oh no, my MP3 gives away the name.
You want me to rename it and send it?
Rename it Song 1.
Song 1.
and strip the ID3 tag.